Welcome to BWTMONLINE and this edition of Inside Story. We ask the questions you want the answers to. And now our host, Ingram Jones.
Hi and welcome to Bayloric TV. In this episode we're talking to Emily Pandelakis. Emily is a boxing publicist, and for those of you who don't know what a boxing publicist is, then in this show you'll find out. Emily actually is working with W.B.O featherweight champion of the world Orlando Salido, who is defending his championship against Mikey Garcia this Saturday, January 19th, on the same card as King Gabriel Rosado against the man known as GGG for the middleweight championship of the world. Both fights are on HBO after dark. So let's find out what Emily has to say then, shall we? Hello, Emily.
Hi, Ingram.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for talking to Bayloric TV. I know you're extremely busy.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so I know that you're a boxing publicist, but I want to know a little bit more about what a boxing publicist is, what they do, because I know a lot of fans don't know what a boxing publicist is.
Well, basically, you're responsible for kind of being the liaison between the fighter and the media and the public. So I do things like schedule interviews and making sure they actually go. And after the interview, if there's audio that I can put out, to social media, I do that. I do social media for some of my fighters. I organize appearances and make sure they have, things to sign and Sharpies and that kind of thing. A lot goes with the job. You might, I have fighters here in Phoenix that I might help them get their trunks and get the patches put on and find them sponsors and that kind of thing. Some of my fighters, I'll make sure they have Pedialyte at the weigh-in. I mean, it's a lot more than just, let's put out, make sure they get articles written about them. So it's kind of a all-encompassing, job. You just kind of help the fighter in any way you can and make sure, their name gets out there when appropriate. We do volunteer work. I, work in the community with my fighters, that kind of thing.
Wow. Now, you know what? You're making me feel jealous already. It sounds a fantastic job.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, it's a lot of work, of course, but, you get to work with these, to me, working with fighters is like working with a higher standard of person because they work so hard at what they do and they're so committed and so dedicated. They're very inspiring. And to be able to work with them and help them, and it's really special. And I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things. Gotten to go to some cool events, and I'm a fan of boxing, so obviously that's been great as well.
That certainly helps when you're there's a difference between a person that does a job for a living and a person who really loves what they're doing and a passion for it. And
it's true.
It sounds so refreshing because obviously you are definitely a fan of boxing and you seem to love your fighters, so that really does help.
I do. My fighters are like family, like all of them. I feel very emotionally attached to all of them. So towards the end of last year, I kind of thought of scaling back, so I could spend a little more time with my family, but I had to do it in such a way that I didn't, I wanted to stay close to them because, you get to know them very well and their families and,
get attached.
Very much so.
Absolutely. So let's wind back a bit. How did you get into boxing? What was your draw to boxing?
Sometime about my mid-20s, I decided I wanted to try to be a boxer. I liked the sport. I wasn't, a diehard fan, but I'd watch fights now and then, and I wanted to learn how to fight.
Wow.
So I walked into a gym here in Phoenix, Arizona. A friend took me, and I met Jose Benavidez Sr., who's a trainer. He's the father of Jose Benavidez Jr., and Jr. was about 13 or 14 at the time. So it was, 6-7 years ago. And so he started training me, and I started, kind of helping him with some stuff. He was recording Junior's fights and putting them on YouTube, and I was helping him kind of with the technical aspect of that stuff. And he was training me, and boxing turned out not to be necessarily for me. I mean, I enjoyed the training, but I wasn't very good at it. I got in the ring and sparred and whatever, but I enjoyed the training. I think I did okay, but life didn't. I couldn't really do that, on a full-time basis. So anyway, Junior ended up going pro really young at 17, and all the time I've been helping Jose, and I got a Facebook started for him, and we started interacting a lot with the media because he got a lot of media attention because he was with Freddie Roach.
Right.
And so Jose kind of handed that off to me, really kind of put a lot of trust in me, and I appreciate it. We're, still very close. We're still a team now, and, he put a lot of trust in me and introduced me to all the media contacts, and kind of that's sort of how I got started. And then early last year, I decided to branch out and start working with other fighters. Jose and then a friend and my partner, Kiona Arianes, they kind of both encouraged me, to start branching out a little bit. So I started with a local fighter, Tony Moreno, and it kind of really snowballed from there. Like, as soon as I started working and doing it, I worked really hard at it, and I just ended up working with a lot of people. So it's really cool. I mean, I'm really happy at doing what I'm doing.
Wow, it sounds absolutely amazing. So who do you manage? Oh, who do you promote at the moment, or your publicist for at the moment?
I have about 15 fighters, actually. I have Jose Benavidez Jr.,
Yes.
Javier Pelos Garcia.
Okay.
I recently started working with Orlando Salido.
Wow.
Of course, who's on January 19th.
Wait, that's on the HBO bill, right? With Rosado as well.
Yep.
Wow.
Orlando's the main event. He's defending his W.B.O title against Mikey Garcia, who's undefeated. So that's a really big fight. Latif Coyote, Wally Omatoso, Jamie Kavanaugh,
Okay.
Andrew Hernandez. I'm Jovan Young, he's a British fighter. He's a Jamaican descent, but he lives in London, and he's actually introduced me to Isaac Dogbo, who's a Ghanaian Olympian. So I'm working with him and his dad to bring him here to the States to make his professional debut.
Wow.
Obviously Tony Moreno, Javier Loya, who's another local fighter. I feel like I know I'm missing somebody, and I'm struggling with it, but if I left anybody out, I'm really sorry.
If anybody else you remember during our conversation, then please just remind me of them and let me know. So one fighter you've mentioned there is Salido, correct? Who's fighting on HBO next Saturday night, HBO After Dark?
Yep.
Right. Can you tell me a bit more about him, his professional record, how he became, world champion?
I think he's something like, he's got 53 professional fights. I want to say he's like 42-7, something in that range. I'm not sure of the exact numbers. He kind of had a rough road getting to be a champion. This is his second time as a champion. He's fought some big names. He fought Gamboa and lost a narrow decision there.
Wow.
And Robert Guerrero.
Wow.
And he eventually fought Juan Manuel Lopez in Puerto Rico, and it was like April of 2011, and he was supposed to lose that fight. He was coming in as the underdog, and he ended up winning, and he won the title at that point, and then he rematched Lopez again in Puerto Rico and won again.
Wow.
So he's just been doing really well, and actually he and Mikey were supposed to fight on November 10th. But Orlando hurt his hand. So actually the first time I met him, his hand was bandaged up, and it was pretty close to the fight. And I thought, I bet this fight isn't going to go. And then, of course, the next day I think it was announced that it was.
So how's Orlando in terms of camp? How's he feeling? How are things going, training and everything like that?
I think he is like 100% like mentally and physically ready. Like every time I've talked to him, he's just been, almost relaxed, like just, intense in the way that Orlando's sort of this quiet intensity, but he's just all business, and he's like, I'm ready. Everybody thinks, this is going to be a hard fight, and I'm sure it is, but, I'm ready, and I'm going to beat him.
So explain to me, from your point of view, how important it is for a fighter to have a publicist?
It kind of depends on, what else is going on in their camp. So, in the case of somebody like Benavidez, he's getting so much attention. It's important so that he can stay focused on what he's supposed to be doing and doesn't have to worry about interviews and when they're going to happen, because the interviews are pretty much coming to him. So that's kind of one type of fighter that would need, that could benefit from a publicist. And then you have somebody like, one of my local guys, Tony Moreno, who doesn't get any media attention. It's important to get his name out so that, he can become other matchmakers and things, he's not a signed fighter. Matchmakers can become aware of him, and that he's here in the Southwest. And also, that when we go to sponsors and say, hey, would you like to sponsor this kid? They can see that he's getting some, media attention. So I think, it kind of goes both ways. If you've got a middle of the road fighter, it just to keep them practiced, for interviews. I mean, interviews are not easy. This is like, I don't do a lot of interviews and I'm a little nervous. So, it's something that you you have to be practiced in. So Pelos Garcia, is starting to get a little attention. So if I can get him some interviews and get him practice so that when he does, he is more successful and he's doing a lot more interviews, he'll be, more relaxed and comfortable.
Well, please let Salido know that he is more than welcome to talk to Bayloric TV. We would love to talk to him.
Sure.
So anytime you can set that interview up, I'd love to speak to him because
okay.
Obviously,
love to do that.
I'm all for giving fighters the opportunity to speak and say what they've got to say. I think it needs to happen more often. I think that it's good practice to talk to the media because fans get to know who you are outside of the ring. And, you get to build a personality outside the ring. And fans seem to like fighters that can communicate with them outside the ring. There's a few fighters that are on Twitter, for example. Pauline Malignaggi, I'm sure you know. He's known as the Twitter King. And he communicates and retweets. And those fans love that so much. He's got so many followers. So social media is so key today for fighters. And I don't think they actually realize how important it is. It's not just about going in the ring and fighting and doing the business. I mean, you could have an unbeaten record and have knocked 25 guys out. But if nobody knows you, you're just another guy who's got a pair of gloves on that can fight.
Yep, it's true. And it is nice, I've got a couple fighters that run their own social media and they interact with the fighters. Jamie Kavanaugh is one, Michael Medina, who I did mention earlier.
Okay.
He's fighting soon. He's one that interacts with the fans on his social media quite a bit. He's one of my ones that really runs his fan page as well, which is really nice for me. But he, and I agree that does definitely help build your fan base. I have a couple fighters who want no part of social media. They kind of steer clear and, I kind of support whatever they want to do because and I'll get, I have fan pages for Benavidez and Beltran before Beltran had a Facebook, and I would just, bug them for content, like, hey, send me some pictures of your training so the fans can kind of stay engaged with you. And so I kind of try to be that conduit if they're not willing to do that.
So that's interesting. Now we know fighters that do want to do it. I'm more interested in the fighters that don't want to do it and their reasons why they don't want to do it.
The reasons, I'm not going to name names. The reasons range from they've had issues with social media and their, personal relationships. Like I just don't want anything to do with it. It's caused problems with my wife or whatever.
Okay.
To just I don't have the time. I'm not interested in trying to learn the technology. Like they're not technology people, so they're like, oh, it's a little bit overwhelming.
Okay.
To just just not time is just a big thing. Like I've got a couple guys that are they just don't have the time. I have a lot of fighters, Gabino Science. He actually does do social media, but it's kind of limited. He works and he goes to school and he's a fighter. So, I mean,
wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, the reasons vary, but, I kind of, like I said, I support them. If they don't, if they don't give me content, I try to bug them for it. Some of my guys have, one of the issues you run into, they have personal Facebooks or Twitters and they say things on there. I'm like, you can't say that on Twitter or Facebook. Please stop saying things like that. So, I'm not necessarily against it if they don't want to do it.
There are some fighters that I know that say what they like on Facebook and say what they like on Twitter, and that's just the way they are. And what can happen is that the fans, they provoke a situation. They can get very abusive on Twitter, and that the danger of being on Twitter on social media is it works productively and counterproductively. If you've got a fighter that is very cool with the fans and is not so sensitive, then cool, they're great for Twitter. But when they're really sensitive and they're on Twitter and they're speaking with their heart on their sleeve like they fight, you can rub fans up the wrong way. So as I said, it's got its benefits and it's got its negative points to it as well.
It's happened before that Pelos Garcia is such a nice kid. He's hilarious. He's got a big following, and everybody's pretty positive towards him, and never isn't really negative. Then we had him on an interview on Leave It in the Ring radio, and people were tweeting things to him that weren't nice, because of that interview. Like they wouldn't normally go out and do that because they wouldn't even think about him, but because he's on the interview, they were saying whatever his last fight was with Ramon, this and that. And I was watching these tweets and I thought, oh, this isn't going to go over well, like he doesn't usually receive that negative feedback, So I called him after. I said, he's like, wow, people are really mean. I'm like, yeah, I don't think people behind a keyboard realize that there's like a person with feelings on the other end of that, So, and I kind of had to say, don't worry about it, it happens. And But
So,
yeah, I mean,
so what was it that the fans didn't like, or what was the problem with the fans? I know you've got keyboard warriors. I mean, they're the best fighters in the world. They've got unbeaten records, and they don't scared anyone.
yeah, I think in that case he had fought Jose Roman. It was stopped in the third round because of a cut, and I don't know if it was a headbutt or a punch. I think even Javier, I think on the interview said I don't even know what it was. And I think people were just saying, "Oh, you would have lost" or something. I don't know. Like, I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but just talking trash about the stoppage, and it was a war. It was a very good fight. It was actually kind of overshadowed because it was on the undercard of Rio Alvarado,
Okay.
but it was sort of a mini war there before it was stopped. So,
There's another fighter you mentioned, Coyote. He fought Antonio Tarver in a very interesting bout.
Yes, in June.
He's a bit of a character.
He is, and he really is an emotional person. He brings that into everything he does. He's a very emotional in good ways and bad ways and sometimes. So he said some things he regretted. He immediately apologized, and we're just kind of right now waiting to get him a fight. He's and one thing we talked about was that Showtime kind of they played up that whole angle. He was so emotional through the press conferences and stuff, and then it kind of backfired.
Well, but does it backfire? I mean, it gets on YouTube. People love to see things hyped up on YouTube and people, being explosive people love it. People click for YouTubes for that. That's what they look at. They look at people ranting and raving and going off the handle and being emotional. The amount of YouTube clips they get for that. So, there's the expression that there's no such thing as bad press. As long as you're in the press, there's no such thing as bad press. Is that true?
I don't think so. Honestly, like between you and me, or between you and me and everybody listening, I don't think so. I think there's definitely, bad press can be negative. Just seeing that in my experience, and I mean, hopefully, Latif has the opportunity to get back on Showtime. I know he wants to. He has a lot of respect for them, and just had a very emotional moment after a fight, in which of course Tarver tested positive for steroids after the fight.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I would have liked to see it handled a different way, but you can't change what already happened. So hopefully, he gets that opportunity again.
Well, I heard a story that he's going to move up to heavyweight. Is this true?
That's correct. Yeah, we really can't find any fights for him at cruiserweight that are of merit. Like he should have gotten the shot at the W.B.O title after Tarver tested positive and he got the draw, and they didn't, for some reason that didn't happen. And I'm not sure of all the politics and what happened behind the scenes there, but it wasn't a positive thing in our camp. So he has decided now to campaign at heavyweight, and his promoter Gary Shaw is working to find him about so he can make that his heavyweight debut.
He would know himself whether he could do well at heavyweight. I mean, he does punch pretty powerfully. He's got an interesting style. He gave Tarver an interesting fight. I think him at heavyweight could be. I mean, he could be stronger at heavyweight. He might punch harder at heavyweight. He might be slower at heavyweight. Who knows? But he's definitely going to be a character that's necessary in the heavyweight division, because the heavyweight division is lacking personalities.
Yeah, well, he definitely has that, and he's been training. I've talked to him, a couple times a month ever since that fight, sometimes more than others, and he's just like, Emily, I'm training so hard, I just want to fight. That's all he wants, is just to fight, and I think there's more opportunities for him to do that at heavyweight.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of why they're making that move.
So, do you know who's he sparring in terms of preparing to fight in the heavyweight division? Because obviously you'll have to spar. I mean, as a cruiserweight, I'm sure he sparred heavyweights, but who are the heavyweights he's sparring with now? Do you have any names?
I don't. I'm so sorry for that. I don't even know. I haven't talked to him in a few weeks, and I honestly don't know who he's sparring with right now at the wild card.
Let's see. There's another conversation, another time for us to have, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, I want to talk a bit more about your fighters. You talked about Salido. Now, he's fighting. He said he's which division is Salido fighting in?
He's in the featherweight division.
He's in the featherweight division. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He's currently the W.B.O champion, and I think he's ranked number 1 or 2 for ring as well.
Okay, I know Gamboa moved up, didn't he?
Yeah, there was some shuffling around in there, but yeah.
Do you know who else is in the featherweight division? Who else have they got in the featherweight division?
Well, we have Mikey Garcia.
Yes.
I'm drawing a blank right now. I mean, you have. Yeah, I'm struggling. Sorry.
I'm struggling too. Back in the day, I could have told you all the featherweights. Back in the day, I could tell you 10 years ago, I could have told you about Pereira, Morales, and Nazim Hamed. I could have told you, but featherweights.
You have Vasquez Jr. You have Juanma as well. I think Juanma's getting ready to fight someone as well.
Cool. As we talk about cruiserweight division, the heavyweight division. I have an interview I'll be doing later with Eddie Chambers, and Eddie Chambers is moving from the heavyweight division down to the cruiserweight division because he himself is struggling to get fights. So that's an interesting thing. That Coyote's moving from the cruiserweight division up to the heavyweight division.
I agree. I don't know. Yeah, that's funny. I remember seeing those tweets, and I like Eddie. He seems like a good guy, and I thought, why can't the two of them fight? And I'm not, that's not my job, so I don't even ask the question. But I thought, okay, well, they'll figure it out, I guess, if it's gonna happen.
When I do the interview later, I'll ask him if we try and get a fight going between the two of them.
Yeah, I kind of that's not my thing. That's why I didn't even ask the question, because I was like, you know what, these guys know what they're doing. They know Eddie's out there. They know everybody's out there. So I'm not gonna step into that.
If you've got very good fighters and with good records, does that mean that it's easier to them to sell them as fighters, or is it more difficult to sell them as fighters?
Well, I will tell you that there's a manager in boxing that I talk with pretty frequently, and what he'll tell you is, there's a point when they get to be 7-0, 8-0, 9-0, where it's actually a little more difficult to get them fights because people don't want to fight them. They're undefeated, but they're also still not enough to get the attention of some of the promoters where they'll find fights for them. So that's a little difficult. I mean, obviously, when you say sell them, in terms of selling them to a radio show or, for an interview, it is easier when they have a better record, for sure. But what's more interesting is if they have a good story. So somebody like Garcia has a couple losses, but he's got a good story. And, same with Orlando. So,
okay. So, I mean, let's say I've got a record of 25 fights, 25 wins, 25 KOs, example. And I'm knocking everybody out that I'm fighting. There are lots of stories that I said. The usual story is I can't get fights because nobody wants to fight me. Now, in the UK, it's a smaller place. But in America, there are so many fighters in America. How come you can't get a fight? I don't understand it.
I mean, there's different, factors. Like, a loss nowadays has a lot more of an impact than it did, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago. People tend to write you off a lot more quickly with 1 or 2 losses than they would have in the past. So I think people are reticent to put that 0 on the line. But that being said, I mean, I think we got a good crop of fighters right now. I mean, look at even Orlando and Mikey. I mean, Orlando's not going to be an easy fight for Mikey. Mikey's 30-0.
Okay.
And he's taking this, this fight. I mean, and same with, Orlando's fighting this guy. So I don't know. I would say that if you have the proper team around you, you shouldn't have trouble finding fights. Because there are people that are willing to take a risk to fight and, get the glory. You look at like Rios and Alvarado. Alvarado was undefeated before that fight, and he put his 0 on the line against Rios, who was not going to be an easy fight,
Absolutely. So, I mean, there are certain fights that are going to be made this year. So I hear that one of the main fights that were trying to be made is Mayweather and Pacquiao. Now, my view, and it's just my view, that it might offend a few people, I thought, for me, Mayweather is the best defensive fighter in the world and also has got probably the best straight right hand in the business. And he's fighting against someone like Manny Pacquiao, who has struggled against guys who can box and counter punches. And Mayweather is one of the best counter punchers in the world, if not the best. That fight wasn't made because not only just, the possibility that Manny Pacquiao could be a cash cow and makes a lot of money, and Bob Arum can make as much money as possible instead of and avoid getting beat by Mayweather. And Mayweather may not want the fight because if he got beat by Pacquiao, then he'd lose his undefeated record and his marketability. So what do you think?
I don't think that Mayweather, I mean, if Pacquiao beat Mayweather, I don't think that Mayweather would lose his marketability because I don't think that much of his marketability is tied up into him being undefeated. I mean, I think it's more of his personality, and his fighting style is very slick. He's a very intelligent fighter. So I don't think that would be the case. I don't know if they'll make the fight. I mean, I've been saying 2 years now. I don't think so, and they haven't. But I think boxing fans have kind of moved past that, and they are looking at kind of the next crop of fighters, the Matisse and Rios and some of the other ones. And If it happens, it'll be huge, of course, but I don't think anybody will be disappointed anymore if it doesn't. I think the ship has sailed a little bit on that.
While you're talking about the new crop of fighters, I'm going to bring in another name, Saul Alvarez or Canelo. Mm-hmm. Canelo. He is due to. They're saying that he's rumored to fight Floyd Mayweather in September. He's undefeated. I think he's light middleweight. He's got a perfect record. He's got a great fan base for the Mexicans. He makes a lot of money for Golden Boy. So far, he hasn't fought anybody in his weight division that has given a fight back. So far, he's fought smaller guys, old people over the hill, and so now they're asking Golden Boy, let's give him a real fight. So now the real fight would be Floyd Mayweather. What are your thoughts on this?
I think they'll give him somebody else before they'll have him fight Floyd. If that happens, I think obviously boxing fans would love to see that fight, but I see him fighting maybe a Cotto or somebody like that beforehand. I think they'll put him in with somebody that's still competitive in the division. Yeah. I do believe that it's time to step it up a little bit on this competition. I am not qualified to even say that. That's my opinion as a fan. I'm not a matchmaker or anything, but I would like to see, I wouldn't mind as a fan seeing him, fight something a step up. He's still very young. And yes, he's fought a lot, but he's been fighting since he was 15, and his competition hasn't, still been very, very strong. So, and I believe, in stepping up a fighter slowly. So I'm okay with them not putting him in with Mayweather right away, but they're to take another step. I think somebody like Cotto, Trout. I would like to see.
I'm not sure about Trout.
Well, I think that would be a dangerous fight, for Canelo. But I'm just saying,
yes.
I would like to see him step up a little bit, of course, like any other fan. But I
was always told in the gym. When I used to, I did do some training. I did do some sparring over in America. And it was in Miami. And the trainer there said to me, if you've got a fighter that's got a long unbeaten run that has not fought any quality opponents in their own weight category, it's always a sign that something has happened in the gym, and the trainers or the promoters, either they've been knocked out in sparring, or they've been badly exposed, or they've got defensive flaws against good counterpunchers, against good sparring partners or journeymen in the gym, and it's been exposed. So they think, we can't afford to match him with this fighter or that fighter. Let's keep him unbeaten. Let's put him against certain fighters. We can still draw the money in. And by the time he's going to have a big fight, and there's a possibility he could get thrown to the slaughterhouse, as they would say, we've at least made as much money as we can out of him.
Yeah, that's a very cynical sort of approach or sort of view on things. Certainly that could be the case. I'm a little. I don't know. I couldn't say. I'm not qualified to say that could be the case. Maybe the trainer, there's people who've been in boxing a lot longer than I can that can say that. I think, he's definitely a moneymaker for them. Obviously, he's got a huge fan base, like you said. And a lot of people, I went to Alpha Sushi the other day, and a few of my friends that are the sushi chefs at the place were talking about him. They are completely 100% sold on him. And, I'm really interested to see the path that his career takes. I think that, he seems to be a solid fighter, and I don't know about that. That certainly makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it's true or not.
But another thing is, boxing is that people say boxing's a dying sport, and that MMA and UFC are growing fast because of the competitive matches that are being made. Now, if promoters go down the line of keep getting fighters unbeaten records and milking the fans are going to get fed up of watching fights, one-sided cards, tuning into HBO to watch the 5 guys that we know are going to win the fight, not blow guys away in 3 or 4 rounds, keep their unbeaten records, or defend their world titles. Whereas yesteryear it was a point about really discovering who the best fighters were: Ali Foreman, Ali Fraser, Foreman, Fraser, and then in middleweight division, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler, all of that era, the golden era, you'd say. But it seems today it's all about having, like I said, unbeaten records and building your fighter up and make as much money as you can out of them.
I have, well, a few different things. Like with UFC and boxing, I think that the fan base, there is some crossover, but on the whole, the fan base are just two different groups of people, and the sports are two different sports. Like, I know a lot of people who are in the UFC that will not watch a boxing match and vice versa. I have recently paid more attention because Benavidez Senior is here in Phoenix and he's training some UFC fighters. So, I find myself kind of tuning in once in a while to see what's happening. But I don't really think that one threatens the other in any way. I think boxing's still a little bit bigger based on pay-per-view numbers and that kind of thing. But UFC fights are more accessible to fans. And I think that really is what makes more of a difference in gaining or losing fans is the accessibility of the sport. Now that they're bringing boxing back to network television, I think that's going to expose more people to boxing, and the matchups are going to be the matchups. I mean, you're going to have for every Canelo and Lopez matchup, you're going to have a Rios and Alvarado, and I think you're going to gain as many fans as you lose, with those fights. And I think again, boxing growing or dying or any of that, I don't think it's dying by any stretch, but I do think that mainstream America is not exposed to it. If I tell somebody, hey, I work with this fighter, nobody knows them, unless they're a fan. Like, unless even Salido, he's a world champion, people are like, who? I don't know who that is. Even some fans. And that's a harsh truth that boxing fans, it's hard to say that. Of course they know who Pacquiao is, of course they know who Mayweather is, and that's a lot of them, that's it. A lot of mainstream people that aren't into the sport. And I think that with the bringing boxing back to network television on Sunday afternoon when you're, hanging around the house, there are going to be more fans being brought into the sport.
Okay, one final question, or two final questions, I say. Final question number one would be to you, what would be your perfect 2013 with your fighters?
Well, obviously seeing Orlando, retain his title in January is going to be huge. With my fighters, personally, with my career, is that what you mean, or
both? Both. So that's a two-way question.
I would like to see, my goal for myself and my fighters in 2013 is to be a little more consistent about the way that I present them to the media, the way that I, maintain their social media, just be consistent throughout the year, because I find myself focusing more on each fighter when they're getting closer to a fight, which is great, but that's what the promoters do too. The promoters already do that. They already put their names out there. So I need to be kind of in between the fights, keeping the fans and the media updated on what they're doing. So that's kind of my goal, is to be a little more consistent in that.
Okay.
And to kind of make the execution of that a little easier on myself as well. And then, for my fighters, just obviously staying healthy and winning. I mean, that's, making sure they have whatever support they need from me to help them in those goals. I mean, anything I can do to help them, I'm there.
So probably some more world title challenges in 2013.
That would be nice. Ray Beltran, I'd like to see him fight for a world title in 2013. That's another one I didn't mention. He's the NABF champion. See, okay. I knew I was forgetting something.
Which division is he in?
He's in the lightweight division.
Lightweight division. Okay, we've got lightweight. Oh, lightweight division. So obviously Adrian Broner, and he's fighting Gavin Reese.
Yeah.
Yes, and then after that, they're trying. I'm sure that's just a setup fight for Ricky Burns, the W.B.O champion from Scotland.
Yeah, that's what I understand. That's what I've heard.
So that's the fight.
Yeah, it's a pretty stacked division. I mean, you got Miguel Vasquez. You got
Absolutely.
It's a very strong division, and Ray kind of broke into it again. I've known Ray as long as I've been involved in boxing, since I was 25 years. He beat Hank Lundy this year, or in 2012. He upset Hank Lundy for the NABF title.
Wow.
He defended it against Hoon in November, December timeframe, and then now of course he's healing his hand, working in the gym, and hopefully we'll see him again, and hopefully in a world title fight this year or early next year.
Well, the win he had against Hank Lundy was definitely impressive. So fight fans obviously have seen that and seen how he fought against Hank Lundy, and Hank Lundy's now making a comeback, I believe, and he's got great hopes for the future. So congratulations.
Yeah, very good fighter. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that was an excellent win.
Yeah, I mean, Ray had a compelling story as well. He had a couple where many people that were watching the fights considered that he felt that he was robbed, and he kind of said, if I get robbed against Lundy, I'm retiring, I'm done with this sport. He was kind of frustrated. He's a warrior, he doesn't give up, but he was kind of, I fight for my family, and if I'm losing, even though I'm winning, it's not cool. So this time he won, and it was very emotional. I think I cried for half an hour after the fight. I'm kind of a baby when it comes to boxing, and
Wow.
it was a very emotional fight.
Well, when fighters do interviews and stuff like that you get to. That's why I do these interviews, because I want to hear. I don't want to do the sound bites. I don't want to hear what everybody normally hears from all the other media. I want to hear what's from the heart, that sort of stuff, because that's what fans really want to hear.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
So, Emily, thank you so much for talking to Bayloric TV. I really appreciate it. All the best for Salido this weekend and the rest of your team. And I really look forward to speaking to some of your fighters in the near future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun, and I appreciate you thinking of me, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you. Well, that was Emily Pandelakis talking about her role as a boxing publicist and working with Orlando Salido as he makes his defense of the W.B.O Featherweight Championship of the World this Saturday, January the 19th, on HBO Boxing After Dark, on the same bill, as I said earlier, as Golovkin against King Gabrizado. Thanks for watching the show. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments, share the video to raise awareness of the wonderful work that's been done in boxing, not just by the boxers and the managers, but there are other people as well doing a fantastic job, such as Emily. Yeah, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care. Goodbye.